Hello, how are you? This is Matthew, and this is Talk Radio, truth from the booth, originating from the beautiful port city of Halifax, Nova Scotia. Welcome to the first weekend of February. Glad to be sharing this space with you today. There are a few changes coming to the show as we begin our 10th month. I'll share that with you in about 50 minutes. So, this past Thursday evening, I had the opportunity and pleasure to speak with Wendy Donovan, former mayor of the community of Wolfville, Nova Scotia. Now, on the night of our conversation, we saw overnight temperatures hit minus 22, and Nova Scotians were still reeling from a massive snowstorm on Wednesday. Our conversation is timely, and the public needs to be better informed with what is happening with the housing crisis. Another part of the province, another concerned advocate, another story to share. Our conversation. Wendy, thanks for taking the time to do this show.
My pleasure.
We've been communicating back and forth for a few weeks. I think I may have reached out to you sometime in November when you were in the midst of running for re-election for mayor. I think James put us in touch, and I think I may have sent you an email. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first one I got was really a couple of weeks ago, but
okay. Well, maybe it ended up in your junk mail.
Okay, good. Sorry, but might have.
No, that's okay. But people should understand that this is the first time that we are having a conversation. First time you're hearing my voice, vice versa. So the audience is really, along with me, going to get to know Wendy Donovan and what you're doing for the community of Wolfville, because you're on this program today to talk about the housing crisis and how you're helping those that are struggling in your community. But before we get to all that, I pulled some information off of your social media, and what I do know, and I just want to go back in time a little bit. I want to know a little bit more about Wendy before you arrived in Nova Scotia. I know that you went to the University of Waterloo, degrees in leisure studies, community development. You've worked in municipal government and then became a partner in recreation and library planning firm. So I'm just wondering, what was the motivation or your mentors for this direction in your life at that point?
For the recreation direction?
Yes.
I was a kid who grew up in a I'm going to say a difficult family, and I spent 1 week at a church camp every summer, and that became a really important part of my life. So when I was looking to go to university, the recreation program at Waterloo was brand new. I had reached out to someone and said, being at camp as a kid was very meaningful and really important for me, and I would like to do that, but I have no idea how to do that or follow that thing that was important to me. And they said, oh, by the way, the University of Waterloo is opening up the first program in Canada. It's a brand new program. I'll put you in touch with a professor who is one of the initiators of the program, and he also runs a children's camp in Camp Twingo in the Muskokas. So that was my contact. So it was really something that had been very important in making my life, and I wanted to be part of that. So that's how I never did end up owning or running a children's camp, but that led me to working in municipal recreation and certainly had my hand in running children's programs and community development and so on. But that was really the start for me.
Okay, and that's very interesting. So this individual, would you say that he was kind of the mentor? Like, it just seemed like this opportunity just fell right into your lap at the right time?
Yeah, well, he was, and I only met him once. He was, I don't think that gentleman is alive anymore. He was at the time the president of the Ontario Camping Association, but certainly Jack Pierce, who was the professor at Waterloo, and he's also passed away now, was certainly my mentor and a extremely important person in my life. My sons both went to Twingo, and this past year my granddaughter went there for her first time. So it's a family affair.
Okay, so your time at the University of Waterloo, what time frame are we? What years are we looking at here?
We're talking 70s, early 80s.
Early 80s. Okay. So let's jump forward to, are you originally from Ontario?
No, I'm I'm originally from Moncton, although, and I always tell people, when I was about 2, my parents forcibly took me to London, Ontario. So as people did in the day, in the 50s, they went west, but in those days, west was Ontario. But my mom's family is still in the Riverview, Moncton area, and but I did grow up in London and grew up and spent all of my life until we moved to Nova Scotia in southern Ontario.
Small world. I was born and raised in Woodstock, New Brunswick.
Were you really?
Yes. And I played hardball in Riverview and Moncton all the time. Actually, one of the most severe injuries I ever received to my face happened on a ball field in Riverview.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, my mom's in Northrop, and I remember when I started consulting in New Brunswick, and I said to my aunt, everybody here looks like me. And she said, well, Wendy, there are only 7 English families in New Brunswick. They probably are related to you. So the Maritimes are, in Ontario, you're not related to anybody. Everybody is from away, and that's just the way it is. So coming back here, I always wanted to live in Nova Scotia, so it was a bit of a dream when my stepdaughter came to Acadia. We bought a house and said, well, if we can transfer our business and do as well in the Maritimes as we did in Ontario, then when Madeline graduates, we will move here, and that's exactly what happened.
So that move happened in 2007, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
When we moved here, Madeline started Acadia in 2004, so we were back. We spend the summers here, but during the year, she lived in the house that we ended up renovating and moving ourselves.
So now you're back home full-time in the Maritimes.
I am.
You're in Wolfville, and within 5 years, you were on the council. You serve as a councillor from 2012 to 2020 when you become mayor, just recently,
Right.
losing the last one.
I did.
I'm just wondering, what skill set did you bring with you from Ontario all those years? What were you seeing when you arrived in Nova Scotia? 5 years, you're like, okay, I've seen enough. I need to get involved with politics here in Wolfville. What were you seeing?
Well, it was, my background is in municipalities. I both worked for municipalities, City of Burlington and City of North York, which is now part of Toronto, and my consulting field, which was about 20 years of that, was for municipalities. So I had a strong background in municipal operations, working with councillors, for councillors. So that was pretty much the life that I had lived. I really got involved in, as I mentioned, we had bought the house for my stepdaughter to live in while she was at Acadia, and so we bought the house 2 blocks from Acadia. Once she graduated and we did a big renovation, I think about the first week we were there, and we still had our consulting company, so my husband was somewhere in the country. I woke up to a lot of noise, and it was students had pulled out our 4-foot-high picket fence from the front yard and thrown it on Gaspro, which is a main street. And I was like, who does that? So that got me involved with the town and with housing and quality of life in near university neighborhoods, and that really was how I ended up running for council. It wasn't a plan. I'm pleased with the things. Things are quite different now. I don't credit myself only, but certainly that recognition that everybody has, whether you live close to a university or not, you have a right to have a good life and not to have property damage. So we have there are now 1.5 bylaw officers, compliance officers in the town, and the relationship with between town staff and university staff is, I think, night and day different from what I first experienced in terms of planning for events and parties, and neighborhood management has I've seen a lot of changes
What
since
are
I've been here.
Okay, what are some of your more memorable accomplishments as a counselor and as mayor?
Well, I think that is certainly one. I chaired what we called the Core Housing Task Force to really look at how to maintain the integrity of near campus neighborhoods. I know this is an experience that every university has. I was just talking to obviously to Antigonish over my term as mayor, and also last evening. It doesn't just happen in Wolfville; it happens in Halifax, and it's the reality of having many young people uh, living in close quarters with permanent residents, and sometimes have each has a different expectation of what their life is going to be like during their time in that community, and it's really about understanding and learning to live together, which means that you have to, as a resident, we had to be flexible. You choose to live near a university for things that offers you, and so it's not going to be as quiet as it is farther away from a university. At the same time, it's a great opportunity for our students, and there are always many wonderful students and wonderful opportunities to engage students in the community, and I think we are seeing a lot of that in Wolfville. So those are some of the accomplishments. Wolfville is a growing town. It has a lot of. It's very small, uh, 7 square kilometers, and even though our population reads as just over 5,000, it's really about 9,000 when you add students who are not included in those counts. So pretty high density. I think about more than 1,000 people per square kilometer. And to compare that to Kentville, they have about 380 people per square kilometer. So, and then you add, we are the center of the wine industry in Nova Scotia, and we have tons of tourists. So, and one main street that goes through town. So we have traffic issues that need to be addressed, and the town does its best, but we have a very small tax base. So those are some of the things that the less interesting things, I guess, that you try and manage on council.
You had mentioned just within the last few days, you had an opportunity to speak with the chair of the Antigonish Affordable Housing Association. This is an educational program. So, what did the chair of the Antigonish Affordable Housing Association share with you?
She was just a little bit of background. There's a group of us who have been meeting for just a little over a year. Started meeting really based on a workshop that I held a year ago, October. We have a large community in Wolfville, and the provincial legislation has indicated that deinstitutionalization across the province by 2030. And although in my view, I think that L'Arche appears to me to be well deinstitutionalized, there was a concern from the chair and the board that maybe they had to do something else around housing. So this is my consulting facilitating background. I brought together people from the university, people from the town, L'Arche, service groups who provide significant funding in our community, to say, and the church community, who was also looking at seniors housing. Can you guys talk amongst yourself? Is there anything that you might be initiating that could help each other? So it was just an evening spent to share, and from that, a number of people wanted to keep meeting. When we got back to meeting in January, our world had changed. We now had people living rough in Wolfville, which was pretty new for us. And so the focus really moved from that much more long-term, can we develop some partnerships around housing for groups in our community, to what can we do to address this immediate issue of people living outside in our community, and that was your friend Steve and James were and are part of that. And that's really, so we started working on that. We have now, that is not the same type of issue, and so we pulled together a meeting last night and invited the chair of the Antigonish not-for-profit, Antigonish Affordable Housing Society to find out what they had done, what their target market was, and what could we learn from her. And I must say, Colleen was extremely generous with her time and her advice and her insight.
Yes, it's all about sharing the knowledge. It's all about sharing knowledge.
It really is. And it's, I think one of the things that I am very aware of is that some of these issues that are really huge issues in all communities now, the kind of the scope of housing, everything from those people who are truly unhoused, living in our parks, to emergency and crisis housing. So Chrysalis House is a woman's shelter in Kentville, to the things that the Antigonish group does, which is really not-for-profit affordable housing, which is not emergency housing. It's not shelters. It's not market housing. But there's people in our community that need a variety of housing, and unfortunately, I believe unfortunately, the groups that are responding are often, and too often, or maybe always, the good-willed, not-for-profit community. And that's not to say that they should not be. I think they do a very good job. But boy, they are, spend too much of their time fundraising and trying to get people to provide free of charge services. I mean, they really are the heart and soul of our communities, and yet they have to work so hard to do what they're doing. It's just really been an eye-opener for me.
I'm glad that you said that, because I've told people many times that there is a Facebook group out there called Helping End Homelessness in Nova Scotia. And that is a community-based Facebook page. And we have people there that are reaching into their own wallets to help other Nova Scotians. So, which brings me to this. Is there just, I think one of the big hurdles is the municipal government, provincial government, federal government have a really tight grip on the purse strings.
Yeah. Now, housing in Nova Scotia, it differs, I think, from province to province, but housing in Nova Scotia is really the responsibility of the provincial government. As well, for the most part, right across Canada, as long as I can remember, housing has been largely left to the market. So my dad was a small builder, and he went through his ups and downs in his lifetime. But building, if you can afford a market house, and knock on wood, that has been the story of my life, you do just fine in the market. But if you can't do just fine in the market, then it's kind of a mishmash of social housing, which the provinces seem to be getting out of in this country. And then for those who are the most vulnerable, it's left to the not-for-profit. It's hard. Maybe I'm a little bit protective of the municipal sector, but particularly small municipalities, but I dare say it's no different for Halifax. They do not have a responsibility for building housing. They do not have the resources, and I think that's a problem. Not necessarily. I think small towns like Wolfville probably have enough to do without taking on social housing. But we are the people that see it, long before anybody in the provincial government knew that there were people sleeping outside at our library. Our librarian and our residents and our council knew that and had to step up, because if they didn't, nobody else was going to.
Can you give us the latest on that? Was that the Roby Tufts Park?
It is. It started about 3 years ago. There was a fellow who was sleeping in a tent in Reservoir Park, which is in kind of the northeast part of Wolfville. The park was signed no overnight camping, and so at that time RCMP and compliance moved that person along into Kentville. That was really the first that I had seen, and that's not to say that there haven't from time to time been people in tents in maybe some of the more, not that anything is very remote in Wolfville, but that was the first that I was aware that there was someone sleeping in a park, and that was moved along. In the late fall of 2023, it was obvious that there were a couple of folks sleeping at the library, behind the library in Roby Tufts Park. Our staff at that time said that the park was not zoned no overnight camping, and their understanding was that nothing could be done. There could not be. I mean, certainly staff would say, would you like to go to Open Arms, which is in Kentville, but there can be no force to do that. And I think you're familiar with that as well in the Halifax area. So about that time, our group, which was meeting not because of that, it was brought to our attention through James and through Steve. GoFunding initiative was started to get tents. Staff asked us if staff recommended that they put a porta potty. All of council agreed to that staff direction. It was, we got a letter the next day from a resident who said that was not appropriate. A couple of councillors agreed with that, and because it wasn't a motion, no porta potty was put out until staff brought that request back 6 weeks later, at which time we moved a motion. So that there were 2 people all through last winter. By last summer, there were 5 tents. Couple of folks who were from Halifax who thought the view was better. There was therefore growing concern that the view of Blomidon was nicer than the view in Halifax, and how would we deal with what seemed to be a growing problem for a growing issue for the town, and a lot of concerns from residents and other residents trying to help and address these problems. I believe sometime in October, Open Arms got some additional funding. The coordinated access, I think one of the folks that had been meeting with our group had done a lot of work with CMHA and Canadian Mental Health Association, and got somebody to come into town, and through that process and the opening of the pallet shelters, places were found for 3 of those people who had been sleeping at Roby Tufts, and another fellow had moved on, and another fellow and his girlfriend who had come from Halifax had gone back to Halifax. So there is now a few more resources from Open Arms and coordinated access should somebody else show up in the town.
Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned coordinated access. Now, this is something that has just been implemented. It wasn't around when you were at the end of your mayor.
It was not, okay. And was not even aware of it. And James Skinner, I think is someone that
yes.
Was very, he was very instrumental in just, I don't know if he wears people down, but, and I say that in the most loving way, he was able to bring attention to the town. I believe Open Arms also got some more funding, so they were, and again, I don't fault any of our service providers are not-for-profits, but when you have, Open Arms, for example, is serving a very large area and had, a couple of staff. I think they have 4 now, so they're able to provide a little more support. But it's really hard for not-for-profits. I'm sure they can be, going full out and still not covering all the things that they could cover if they had more resources.
Yeah, so I just want to let people know we're talking about the Canadian Mental Health Association Annapolis Valley Coordinated Access System. It's how it's access points across the province, helping those connect with the right resources. And just everything we're talking about, you can Google it. I want to get your thoughts. We're going to take a break here in a couple of moments, but I want to get your thoughts on trauma-informed education sessions for all city workers, like go to encampments, continuing education, like really get boots on the ground to help understand the complexities of being unhoused and just how the mental unwellness is out there. Do you agree with something like that?
I do. I have to say that there's quite a difference, and our staff brought in Project Hope, and 3 myself and 2 counselors attended the workshop that staff put on, and it was for not all staff. I think all staff could have attended, but it was really for those staff, those public works and park staff, and our compliance staff who in their day-to-day work could have very easily run into this situation and want to understand it better. So that was very informative, very helpful. In a small town like Wolfville, where we have, 1.5 compliance staff and a fairly small public works park staff who at any given time are probably out, they're probably clearing roads, snow tonight. It's different than Halifax, and I know Max Chauvin. He is actually used to be a client of mine when he was at the Dartmouth Sportsplex. Larger municipalities have access and have probably need for more permanent staff who can address this problem. So do I think that all municipal staff should be aware of this? Of course, it's good. I think we have to do something other than say this is the reality of our community and therefore we are going to prepare for that. At the same time, I want our staff to be prepared for things that have emerged in our community. So do I think this, if this is going to be a municipal responsibility, then municipalities need more funding?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it always comes down to, unfortunately, more funding. You have more time to hang out, yes?
I do.
Okay, we are speaking with Wendy Donovan, former mayor of Wolfville. My name is Matthew. You are listening to Truth from the Booth. We'll be right back. The conversation continues right here on Folked Up Radio after this. The winter season. Heavy snow, ice accumulation, freezing temperatures, and wind chill. Frostbite, frost snip, and hypothermia increase at wind chill values below minus 27. At minus 34, it doesn't matter who you are. Not properly dressed for the cold, hypothermia in as little as 10 minutes. Winter storms are often called the deceptive killer since many deaths can be attributed to indirect causes of adverse weather. Housing first, housing for all. Housing now. Talk radio with a focus. Truth from the booth. The intention? To provide a brief glimpse into unique, real-life situations. True stories. The good, the bad, and the unjust. Tens of thousands of listeners and hours of meaningful and relevant conversations. When you're ready to share your story, share it on Truth from the Booth. Saturdays and Sundays on Folked Up Radio.
Hi, this is Wendy Donovan, and it's my pleasure to be speaking to Matt in Truth from the Booth.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Okay, let's get right back into the conversation. You had, just a few days ago, the Canadian Federation of University Women had a panel discussion. Now, I'm curious, what did each panelist bring to that particular discussion?
Right. Well, there were 3 of us. There was a panelist who is a staff from Open Arms. And so she would have brought information to us in terms of kind of. She is the boots on the ground working with the new pellet shelter that is a provincial initiative being overseen by Open Arms, the homeless shelter in Kentville. There was Steve Wilsack. Steve is a Wolfville resident, a friend of mine, and also I know a good friend of yours. And I guess we got to really know this part of Steve from all the work that you and he did at Grand Parade in Halifax last winter, and myself as a I guess representing somebody with a municipal and municipal governance background.
Okay, so you're all up on stage and you're sharing your knowledge. You have a room full of people. How does the general public, those in attendance, what's the sense? Like, how do they view homelessness? What does it mean to them to be homeless?
Yeah, well, it was a good turnout. There were certainly maybe half the room were the members of the Canadian Federation of University Women, and there were other people. There were town staff who were there. There were residents from the community, from the church community, from the Wolfville area and area interchurch council, and from the community at large. I would say that the audience there were those people who are very committed to finding a solution. So there would not have been anyone in the room who was saying, we can't have this in our community. That was not the audience. So it was we'll call it a friendly audience for the topic that we had.
I think people need to understand that the reason people are without homes nowadays, in a nutshell, it's the rising cost of living, and we'll talk about renters here in a couple of moments. But that's a big thing. I see it on social media all the time. We have people escaping domestic violence. People are being reno evicted and just evicted left, right, and center. I've never.
I didn't,
wow.
and this has been the past year has been an education for me. Having grown up in a province that did not have, the first time I heard the concept of fixed term lease, I thought, well, of course, you always sign a lease for a year, or you go month to month. And when it was explained to me what fixed term lease means in Nova Scotia, that was a surprise. And I would say a year ago I did not understand that. It was we had a housing navigator from Kentville came and spoke to us and started to talk about this, and it took a few tries for me to. I don't understand what you're talking about to understand that. And I think I read a stat that said 40% of those who were living unsheltered last winter had been caught up in fixed term lease. So that was an eye opener for me.
So explain that to me. What exactly does that mean?
Fixed term lease means that, and I think it's an unintended consequence of two pieces of legislation. We have a rent cap in this province, perhaps in most provinces, which, if one is being charitable, is so that rents do not go up higher than the cost of living. So it was 2%. It is now 5%, I think, until 2027. That should be a good thing. I think there are two sides of that. First of all, it allows you to anticipate what your rent will go up, and hopefully it's, if you are on a salary or on a Canada pension, which also goes up often at the rate of cost of living, that should be a protection for you. However, I think it's fair to say that cost of living is based on the cost to us as a household. It doesn't work for municipalities. Municipalities are not buying groceries, they're buying asphalt and cement, and those prices and utilities went up far more than 5%. Similarly, for a landlord, it's possible that their costs are higher than 5%. So that's one of the pieces of legislation. The fixed term lease allows a landlord to, once you have come to the end of your year's lease, because they can only put your rent up 5%, and let's say their costs are 10%, or maybe their costs are only 2%, but it does allow them to say, I am not renting to you. I'm not renting to you, Wendy. Even though you might be willing to pay 10%, I am not allowed to charge you 10%. But Matt over here, he will pay 10%. And because he wasn't my tenant last year, I can bring Matt in to your place. So, you've been a good tenant, and maybe you'd like to pay more just to stay in your place, but I'm not allowed to do that. So I think it is two pieces of legislation that were well intended, as legislation often is, but the people, both landlords and tenants, get caught in the unintended consequences of that. And again, perhaps it is also being used in a less, I'm sorry, but I'm stuck in this situation. I have to recover my costs, and I can't charge you more than 5%. Maybe it does allow a landlord to get around it, but regardless, it is creating a problem for people who have a place that they want to stay in, and yet they can't. And I believe that the NDP, and I would say I have voted for every party in my life. I am not a follower of any one party, but I have to say that the Nova Scotia NDP have asked that the fixed term lease legislation be looked at, and both the PCs and the Liberals declined. So it's a problem. I think it's a problem. As I say, a year ago, if you had asked me what it was, I couldn't have told you. And once I understood what it was, I was shocked.
Yeah, it's again going back to what I just said a few moments ago. It's the rising cost of living. If you have X amount of dollars coming in and everything else goes up, you're going to find yourself on the street. Wendy, I don't know how many senior citizens that I spoke with last year at Grand Parade Square who left in tears because they know the realization of, wow, someday we may be in a situation like people's lives can be upended in the blink of an eye, and that's what I've been trying to tell people.
And it's the fact that we are not comfortable discussing that is troubling to me. And it's also the place to live. I was thinking about this earlier. If we treated education and health in this country, maybe health isn't something I should, but everybody has the right to go to elementary school and go to high school. That is a right. Everybody has a right. Even if you don't have a doctor, you can go to Emerge and you can get a prescription for your sore throat. Housing should be treated exactly the same way. Housing is not, we say housing first, because you will die in this country. You will die tonight if you are outside and you don't have somewhere to be warm. But it's more than that. If you cannot stay in your apartment or stay in your community, all those social attributes that we also need, in addition to a place that's warm, you lose. Imagine a child going to school, and then next year they have to move and find a new school. That's not good.
No. People, everyone that I've met that's unhoused here in the HRM, they have been continuously uprooted from here, uprooted from there. It's just...
And, that's probably, I would say, for me, that would be hard enough. But if you have other things happening in your life, if you have, you're inclined to a mental illness, if you live in an abusive situation, the lack of a safe and a ongoing place to live is just going to exacerbate that problem and make things even worse for you and for your community. So I feel strongly about this. I feel strongly about this as I felt about children being able to go to camp when they were young. If you don't have those opportunities, a lot of other things in your life are not going to work. If you don't have a place to live, a place that you can count on, other things are not going to go well.
No, absolutely. You absolutely need a place to just get away from it all. I want to talk about ordinary citizens advocating and lobbying for change. Listen, Wendy, I've seen the first time I saw someone who didn't have a place to live. I've told this story many times. I was in Boston, early 80s. So it's incredibly frustrating where I just turned 52 and I'm referencing seeing homeless people in the 80s. So how do we continue to advocate positively and lobby for change when it doesn't seem like change? The ones that can make change want to see change.
That's a good question, and I know from personal experience that as many people who are advocating for this, there are people who are pushing back against the advocacy. So it's not easy, but I guess the more people that say this is not the kind of country, this is not the kind of province that we are, is something we have to keep doing. I am strongly supportive of the not-for-profit sector. And I actually believe the not-for-profit sector is probably the best sector to deal with this. But what we should be advocating for is for more secure funding for them. I do not advocate for municipalities or the province to take over housing, because I have seen, I worked when I was in the city of North York. I worked, my community was the Jane Finch community. Some people will know what that is. It is a community of what was called metro housing. And that's not a healthy situation either, to put 60,000 people who are living on social housing in an area led to a huge drug problem, crime problem, wasn't healthy for the kids or the teenagers that I worked with. And so that's not good. I believe that having housing and having supports for those sectors of our community that need supports, wraparound supports, funding rent supports is good. I would like to see, what I would be advocating for is to build up and secure the not-for-profit group sector, because that is a sector that really pays attention and wants to provide the services on the ground that people need.
Okay, so the people here in Nova Scotia, in Canada, were familiar with with the crisis here and what's being done and what's not being done. Pallet shelters, tents, forum shelters. But we know in other countries they're doing it differently. So I'm just curious. Scotland and Finland. What are they doing over there? Where should we be looking for prototypes?
Well, I'm not familiar with Scotland. I did read an article a number of months ago on Finland that I shared around, and I guess in the 60s, Finland's a population not huge, 5 million people, and I think at the time they had about 20,000 people who were homeless. Some, I guess the Second World War was about 15 years over in the early 60s. So there were people who were homeless for a variety of reasons. They made it a countrywide initiative for people not to be homeless. And there are now still about 200 people, based on that article, who are homeless, but they have moved that 20,000 to 200 people through a combination of rent supports, but also recognizing that some people need a kind of support that is more than just a roof over their head and money to pay for that roof, that they do need wraparound supports, and they have provided that. And I think maybe in the way that Canada, back when I was quite a young child, decided that we would have universal health care in this country, is to have universal housing support. We've done it. You know, I know we have a lot of problems with our health services, but at the most basic level, they are there.
I want to close this conversation by just saying this, that moving forward, we need to deal with this humanitarian crisis with clarity and compassion. What can you say in closing to the residents of Wolfville, and how you will continue to help those struggling with housing?
I think we have to educate ourselves. We have to, it is not a, you know, I tried to bring to my council, I did bring a motion to write a letter to the Premier and ask that the province look at fixed term lease, at the unintended consequences of that. The many people in my community were upset by that, and council ultimately rescinded the motion. I didn't write the letter. I won't go into all of the reasons, but people, it's as if the market is so important in our country that anything that seeks to undermine the market is not good. And when it comes to housing, education, and healthcare, I don't think we can always rely on the market. And I think that's a message that I give to people. It's certainly a message that the group of people that have continued to meet and try to figure out what we as just plain ordinary residents can do are trying to say. And the opportunity for all residents to understand that we're a compassionate and caring town, province, country, and this is how we show that compassion, is just something we have to keep talking about.
Absolutely. Wendy Donovan, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. All the best to you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you again, Wendy, for being part of this radio program that, as you may or may not know, focuses on the unhoused population and making sure they have a platform to share their experiences with you. So, moving forward with this program, one guest per weekend, still Saturdays and Sundays, but longer shows, more in-depth conversations, and then putting those conversations up on YouTube. So sponsor, advertise, be a guest on this show. Contact me on the website. Thanks again for letting me and Wendy into your space today. Back here in 6 days. Yes? I'm Matthew, and this is 99.9 FM Perth Andover and FolkedUpRadio.com.